Welcome to Sage-Adek, the place where stories come alive. Whether you're here to escape, to be inspired, or to simply enjoy a great tale, you're in for something special. Each story is crafted to entertain, intrigue, and leave you wanting more. So sit back, relax, and let the journey begin.
Sophia lost her parents in a ghastly motor accident that changed her life forever. One moment, she had a loving family, and the next, she was left all alone in the world. After the funeral, she was sent to live with her Uncle Charles and Aunt Clara. Aunt Clara had never liked Sophia's mother when she was alive. She always found fault in everything Sophia's mother did. Now that Sophia was under her care, her hatred only grew stronger. "Why did they send this child to my house?" Aunt Clara often muttered under her breath. "As if I don't have enough problems already." From the moment Sophia arrived, Aunt Clara made it clear that she was not welcome. She gave Sophia a small mat to sleep on in the corner of the kitchen, far from the comfort she once knew. Each morning, Aunt Clara would hand Sophia a tray filled with bananas and send her out into the scorching sun. "Go and sell these," Aunt Clara barked one morning, shoving the tray into Sophia's small hands. "Don't come back unless you sell everything. Do you hear me?" "Yes, Auntie," Sophia replied quietly, her voice trembling. She walked the busy streets, calling out to strangers, "Fresh bananas! Please buy some bananas!" The sun burned her skin, and her feet ached from walking all day. Some people stopped to buy, but most ignored her. By evening, Sophia returned home with many bananas still unsold. Aunt Clara's eyes narrowed when she saw the tray. "This is all you sold," she shouted, grabbing a cane from the corner. "You useless child! Do you think food will fall from the sky?" Sophia cried as the cane struck her legs and arms. The pain was sharp, but it wasn't new. This had become her daily reality. To make matters worse, Aunt Clara refused to give her dinner that night. "Go to bed," Aunt Clara snapped. "Maybe hunger will teach you how to sell properly." Sophia's stomach growled as she lay on her mat in the dark kitchen. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she hugged her knees tightly. She missed her parents terribly. She missed her mother's gentle hands and her father's warm laughter. The only place Sophia found peace was at the graveyard. After hawking bananas, she would sneak to her mother's grave, sit beside it, and pour out her pain. "Mama, why did you leave me?" she whispered one evening, her voice breaking. "I'm so tired. Aunt Clara doesn't love me. I don't know what to do anymore." The graveyard was quiet, with only the soft rustling of leaves. But that night, something felt different. A cool breeze swept over Sophia, making her shiver. She looked around, her heart pounding. "Mama," she called softly. That was when she saw it, a small white feather lying on her mother's grave. It seemed to glow faintly under the moonlight. Sophia picked it up, holding it tightly in her hand. From that moment, strange things began to happen. People who never noticed Sophia on the streets suddenly stopped to buy her bananas. One woman even gave her extra money, telling her to buy herself food. Sophia returned home that evening with all the money she had made from selling bananas. She handed it over to Aunt Clara, her face tired but hopeful that maybe, just maybe, tonight. Sophia handed Aunt Clara the money she had earned from selling bananas. Her aunt counted it slowly, her lips curling into a frown. "This is all you made? Useless child. Do you think this is enough to feed this house?" Sophia looked down, her heart sinking. "But Auntie, I sold everything." "And so what?" Aunt Clara snapped. "Go and lie down. There is no food for you tonight." Sophia's stomach growled as she walked to her mat in the corner of the kitchen. She lay down, hugging her knees to her chest. Tears slipped down her cheeks as hunger gnawed at her insides. She closed her eyes tightly, wishing she could see her parents one more time. That night, she had a dream. In the dream, Sophia found herself standing in a beautiful, peaceful place. The air was cool, and the grass beneath her feet was soft. She looked around, confused, until she saw her mother standing under a large tree, smiling at her. "Mama!" Sophia cried, running toward her. Her mother knelt down, opening her arms to hold Sophia tightly. "My sweet child," her mother said softly, stroking Sophia's hair. "I know how hard things have been for you." Sophia clung to her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Mama, it's too hard. Aunt Clara hates me. She beats me and doesn't give me food. I don't know what to do anymore." Her mother gently cupped Sophia's face, looking into her eyes. "You are stronger than you know, my child. But you are not alone. I have left you something to help you." Sophia frowned, confused. "What is it, Mama?" Her mother pointed to Sophia's hand. She looked down and saw the glowing white feather she had picked from her mother's graveyard. "The feather," her mother said. "It is no ordinary feather. Whatever you ask for, the feather will give it to you. All you have to do is believe and ask." Sophia's eyes widened. "Really, Mama? Anything?" Her mother nodded. "Yes, my love. But remember, use it wisely. Do not let anger or greed guide your heart. You have a good soul, Sophia. Let that guide you." Sophia clutched the feather tightly, her heart filled with hope. "Thank you, Mama." Her mother smiled, touching Sophia's cheek one last time. "You are never alone, my child. I am always with you." Before Sophia could say anything else, her mother faded away, and the dream ended. Sophia woke up suddenly, sitting up on her mat. The kitchen was dark, and the house was quiet. She looked down at the feather in her hand, feeling a strange warmth in her heart. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered softly, holding the feather close. The next morning, after Aunt Clara handed her the tray of bananas, Sophia set out to sell them as usual. The scorching sun beat down on her, and by midday, hunger clawed at her stomach. Remembering her dream, Sophia decided to try what her mother had said. She found an uncompleted building nearby and slipped inside, sitting in a quiet corner. Holding the feather tightly, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Feather, please. I'm so hungry. Can I have something to eat?" A soft breeze swept through the room, even though there were no windows. When Sophia opened her eyes, she gasped. Before her was a plate of steaming rice and beans with fried plantains and a large piece of chicken. Beside it was a cold bottle of water. Sophia couldn't believe her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. She ate quickly, savoring every bite, her hunger finally fading. After eating, she went back to hawking, and to her surprise, sold all the bananas quickly. People who usually ignored her stopped to buy some, even smiling at her and giving her extra money. Sophia returned home with the money and handed it to Aunt Clara. "You sold everything again?" Aunt Clara asked, her eyes narrowing. "Yes, Auntie," Sophia replied quietly. Aunt Clara muttered. "Go to the kitchen and stay there. No food for you tonight." But Sophia didn't mind. She wasn't hungry anymore. She knew she had the feather to help her and silently thanked her mother again. As the days went by, Sophia's new routine continued. She would go out to sell bananas, sneak into the uncompleted building when she was hungry, ask the feather for food, and sell everything quickly. Aunt Clara started to notice that Sophia didn't complain about hunger anymore. One evening, she looked at Sophia suspiciously. "You don't cry for food these days. Are you eating outside? Are you stealing my money to buy food?" Sophia shook her head. "No, Auntie. I'm just not hungry." "Not hungry?" Aunt Clara's voice rose. "You daughter of a witch. Don't worry. I will catch you one day. You think you can fool me?" Sophia said nothing, keeping her head down as Aunt Clara's sharp eyes bore into her. One evening, Aunt Clara packed her bags and announced she was traveling to the village for a funeral. "You useless child," she said to Sophia, pointing a finger at her. "Don't think I'll be gone forever. You had better behave yourself while I'm away. Charles, watch her closely. She's full of tricks." Sophia stood silently, her heart heavy. Even though Aunt Clara was leaving, she didn't feel any relief. Uncle Charles had always been quiet, but something about the way he looked at her sometimes made her uncomfortable. As soon as Aunt Clara left, Uncle Charles's demeanor changed. He called Sophia into the sitting room that night and offered her food, something that had never happened before. "Eat, Sophia," he said, his voice unusually soft. "I know how wicked your aunt has been to you. I don't like the way she treats you." Sophia hesitated but sat down. She was hungry, but she didn't trust him. "Thank you, Uncle," she said quietly. Uncle Charles leaned back in his chair, watching her with a strange smile. You're a good girl, Sophia. You don't deserve this life of suffering. Sophia looked down, unsure of what to say. After a long silence, Uncle Charles spoke again. You know, he began, his tone changing, when you turn 18, I will marry you. Sophia's head shot up, her eyes wide with shock. Uncle, what are you saying? I don't understand. Uncle Charles moved closer, lowering his voice. I like you, Sophia. You're a beautiful girl. You don't need to struggle like this. If you marry me, I'll take care of you. You won't have to suffer anymore. Sophia felt her heart pounding in her chest. But you're my uncle, she whispered, her voice trembling. This is wrong. Charles's face darkened. Don't be foolish, Sophia. Your parents are gone. Who else will take care of you? Your aunt doesn't care about you, but I do. He reached out to touch her shoulder, but Sophia jerked away. Uncle, please stop, she said, tears filling her eyes. Charles's eyes narrowed, and he grabbed her wrist. Stop acting like a child, he said harshly. I'm doing this for your own good. You should be grateful. Sophia's heart raced with fear. She struggled to pull her hand away, but he was too strong. Panic filled her as Charles tried to pull her closer. In that moment, she remembered the feather. Reaching into her pocket and clutching it tightly, with tears streaming down her face, she closed her eyes and whispered, Feather, please help me. Protect me from Uncle Charles. Suddenly, a loud crack of thunder echoed through the room, even though the sky outside was clear. A powerful force struck Uncle Charles, sending him flying across the room. He hit the wall with a loud thud and collapsed to the ground, groaning in pain. Sophia didn't wait to see what happened next. She grabbed her slippers and ran out of the house, her heart pounding. She didn't know where to go, but she knew she couldn't stay there. She ran to the nearest neighbor's house, an elderly woman named Mrs. Grace, who had always been kind to her. Sophia banged on the door, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Grace opened the door, her eyes widening in shock when she saw Sophia's state. Sophia, what happened? Why are you crying? Sophia fell to her knees, sobbing. Please, Mama Grace, help me. Uncle Charles tried to hurt me. Mrs. Grace's face hardened. She pulled Sophia inside and closed the door. You're safe now, my child, she said firmly. Nobody will touch you here. Sophia sat down, trembling. She clutched the feather in her hand, silently thanking it for saving her. Mrs. Grace handed her a cup of water and sat beside her. Tell me everything, Sophia, she said gently. Through her tears, Sophia explained what had happened, from Aunt Clara's cruelty to Uncle Charles's actions that night. Mrs. Grace listened intently, her face growing angrier with every word. That man is a disgrace, Mrs. Grace said when Sophia finished. Don't worry, my child. You will not go back to that house. I will protect you. Sophia felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in a long while. She looked up at Mrs. Grace, her voice trembling. Thank you, Mama Grace. I don't know what I would have done without you. Mrs. Grace hugged her tightly. You are not alone, Sophia. You are a brave girl, and you deserve better than this. Sophia spent the night in Mrs. Grace's house, but her mind was restless. She couldn't stop thinking about what might happen next. Would Aunt Clara come back and force her to return? Would Uncle Charles try to harm her again? As she lay on the small bed Mrs. Grace had prepared for her, Sophia held the feather tightly in her hand. Mama, she whispered, tears slipping down her face. Please keep watching over me. I don't know what to do, but I trust you. The next morning, just as the sun was rising, a loud knock echoed on Mrs. Grace's wooden door.
Stay tuned for the continuation of this thrilling tale. You won't believe what happens next. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want me to continue, please give it a thumbs up and type "continue the story" in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when the continuation drops. Thank you once again, and I'll see you in the next part.